The stars had always been quiet for humanity. For 800 years, they had spread across 17 star systems, building colonies, mining asteroids, and raising families under alien suns. They knew about the Celestine hegemony, of course. Everyone knew about the hegemony. It was an empire of 4,000 species that controlled most of the galaxy. But humans had never bothered them, and the hegemony had never bothered humans. Until today, Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the UESS Perseverance, watching the sensor display with tired eyes. She was 67 years old, with gray hair cut short and cybernetic eyes that glowed faintly blue in the dim light. She had gotten those eyes 30 years ago. After a mining accident took her original ones, she had seen a lot of things with both sets of eyes, but she had never seen 200 alien warships appear in Earth's solar system. "Admiral," her communications officer said, his voice shaking slightly, "we are receiving a transmission. It is coming from the largest ship." "Put it on screen," Helena said. The image that appeared was not human. The creature called itself High Arbiter Velthrix, and it looked like a serpent wearing silk robes. Its scales were deep purple, and its eyes were gold with vertical pupils. When it spoke, its voice was translated into English by the ship's computers, but Helena could hear the arrogance underneath the words. "Primitive beings of the human species," Velthrix said, "the Celestine hegemony has watched your expansion with growing concern. You have taken resources that belong to the galaxy. You have spread without permission. This ends now." Helena raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "You will surrender all human territories to the hegemony immediately," Velthrix continued. "Your species will be classified as Class 7 labor stock. You will provide workers for our mining operations in the Outer Rim. You will pay existence taxes for every year your species has traveled between stars without our permission." The bridge crew looked at each other with wide eyes. Helena just crossed her arms. "You have 72 of your Earth hours to comply," Velthrix finished. "If you do not, your species will face corrective extinction. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Then Helena sighed. It was a long, tired sound, like a parent who had just been told their child had broken something valuable. "They really do not know, do they?" she muttered. "Admiral?" her first officer asked. "What are your orders?" Helena walked to her command chair and sat down slowly. She thought about the message she had just received. She thought about her grandchildren on Mars. She thought about the hidden shipyards that humanity had built 300 years ago. Just in case something like this ever happened, humans had always known this day might come. They had read their own history. They knew what happened to civilizations that could not defend themselves. So they had prepared, quietly, secretly, for 3 centuries. "Send the message to the Defense Council," Helena said. "Tell them I recommend we show our guests the basement." Her first officer looked confused. "The basement? Admiral? They will understand." The message traveled at faster than light speed to Earth, to Mars, to every human colony. Within hours, the Defense Council had met and made their decision. Across human space, hidden doors began to open. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, a mountain of rock split apart to reveal a shipyard holding 50 warships. On Titan, one of Saturn's moons, a facility that had pretended to be a research station, activated its true purpose and launched another 100 vessels. In orbit around distant colony worlds, ships that had waited in darkness for generations lit their engines for the first time. 2,000 warships. That was what humanity had hidden from the galaxy. They were not beautiful ships like the hegemony vessels. They were ugly, angular things covered in weapons. They had been built for one purpose only, and that purpose was not exploration or trade. These ships were built to end wars quickly. While the fleet prepared, Helena composed humanity's official response to the hegemony's ultimatum. She thought about writing something long and diplomatic. Then she decided that would be a waste of time. She wrote one sentence and sent it to Velthrix's flagship. "We decline. Move your ships, or we will move them for you." On the hegemony flagship, the High Arbiter read the human response 3 times. He could not believe what he was seeing. In 10,000 years of hegemony history, no species had ever refused an ultimatum. Some had begged for mercy, some had tried to negotiate, some had fled into deep space. But none had ever simply said no. "They must be insane," Velthrix said to his advisors, "or they do not understand their situation." Perhaps they are bluffing, High Arbiter, one of his generals suggested. Our intelligence shows they have only a few hundred military vessels. We outnumber them significantly. Velthrix nodded slowly. Yes, they must be hoping we will back down. Primitive species often overestimate their own importance. He turned to his communications officer. Send no reply. When the deadline passes, we will show them what the hegemony does to those who resist. But even as he spoke, Velthrix felt something strange. It was a cold feeling in his stomach that he did not recognize at first. Then he realized what it was. It was doubt. There had been something in the human admiral's message. Not fear, not desperation, not even anger. The message had felt tired, like a worker being asked to do overtime. Like this was an inconvenience, not an existential threat. What kind of species reacted to extinction threats with annoyance? Velthrix pushed the feeling aside. He had commanded fleets for 200 years. He had conquered dozens of worlds. A single species of soft, pink creatures from a medium-sized planet was not going to make him nervous. The 72 hours passed slowly. Helena spent most of that time coordinating with the Defense Council and positioning her forces. The hidden fleet had emerged from their hiding places and was gathering near Jupiter. She looked at the tactical display showing 2,000 human ships facing 200 hegemony vessels. Admiral, her tactical officer said, the hegemony ships are moving. They have crossed the Mars orbital line. They are actually doing it, Helena's first officer said with amazement. They actually think they can beat us. Helena watched the enemy fleet approach on her display. She thought about all the warnings humanity could have given them. She thought about all the chances the hegemony had to back down. Open a channel to all human ships, she said. Channel open, Admiral. This is Admiral Vance, she said, her voice calm and steady. Our guests have decided to stay. Let us show them proper human hospitality. She paused. All ships, execute Battle Plan Omega. Weapons free. Across the human fleet, 2,000 ships broke formation and began to accelerate. They moved at speeds that the hegemony sensors flagged as impossible. They scattered in patterns that looked like chaos but were actually carefully calculated. On the hegemony flagship, Velthrix watched the human ships approach. His tactical officers were shouting about sensor errors and impossible acceleration rates. High Arbiter, his sensor officer said, his voice filled with something Velthrix had never heard before in a hegemony officer. It was fear. High Arbiter, those ships are accelerating at 15 times standard gravity. No living crew could survive that. Then their crews must be dead, Velthrix said. No, High Arbiter. We are detecting life signs. They are alive. They are just not slowing down. Velthrix stared at the display. The human ships were getting closer. They were not coming in formation, not following any tactical doctrine that the hegemony recognized. They were coming like predators, and his fleet was the prey. For the first time in his 200-year career, High Arbiter Velthrix realized he might have made a terrible mistake. While the human fleet closed in on the hegemony armada, panic was spreading through Velthrix's command structure. Officers who had never known fear were suddenly feeling it for the first time. The reason was simple. They had finally read the intelligence reports about Earth. Senior Analyst Korath was a small, insect-like being with 4 arms and large compound eyes. He had spent his entire career studying primitive species for the hegemony. He thought he had seen everything. Then he opened the file on humanity's homeworld. This cannot be correct, he said to himself as he read. He read it again. Then he contacted the flagship immediately. High Arbiter, Korath said, his voice shaking. I need to speak with you. It is about the humans. We have made a terrible error. Velthrix was busy watching the approaching enemy fleet, but something in Korath's voice made him pay attention. Speak quickly. Their planet, High Arbiter, Earth. It is a death world. The word hung in the air like poison gas. Around the bridge, officers stopped what they were doing and turned to stare. Explain, Velthrix demanded. Korath pulled up the data on the main screen. Earth's gravity is 1.0 standard. That is almost double what most hegemony species evolved in. Their atmosphere is 21% oxygen, which is a corrosive and flammable gas. Their planet has active volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, and floods on a regular basis. He continued, his voice getting higher with each fact. 70% of their planet is covered in salt water. They have predators on every continent. They have parasites that eat their bodies from the inside. They have diseases that kill millions of them every generation. And they have each other. What do you mean? Velthrix asked. Humans are apex predators, High Arbiter. They hunted other animals to extinction for fun. They also spent most of their history fighting wars against each other. They developed nuclear weapons and then actually used them. On themselves. Twice. Velthrix felt that cold feeling in his stomach again. How did they survive such a planet? That is the worst part, Korath said. They did not just survive. They became the dominant species by being more persistent than anything else. When they hunt, they do not chase their prey quickly like most predators. They follow it slowly, for hours or even days, until it collapses from exhaustion. They call it persistence hunting. They tire their prey to death? Yes, and their bodies are designed for it. They can regulate their temperature by releasing water through their skin. They can keep moving when injured. They can function without sleep for days. They can digest almost anything organic. They are biological machines built for endurance. Korath paused. There is more, High Arbiter. The psychological data. Go on. Humans form emotional bonds with almost anything. Other humans, other species, animals, plants, even inanimate objects. They name their vehicles and talk to them. They keep dangerous predators as pets and call them family. They will sacrifice themselves for beings they have never met. That sounds like weakness, Velthrix said, but his voice was uncertain. No, High Arbiter. It makes them unpredictable. A human will fight to the death to protect something it cares about, and they can decide to care about anything, at any time. We cannot predict what they will defend, or how far they will go to defend it. Korath brought up one final piece of data. Classification. Deathworld Category 1 Apex. In all of hegemony history, we have only discovered 2 other species from such worlds. We destroyed both of them before they developed space travel. We were afraid of what they might become, and we missed the humans, Velthrix whispered. Yes, they developed in isolation. They had 800 years to grow without our interference, and now they have 2,000 warships heading toward us. The news spread through the hegemony fleet like fire. Officers and soldiers who came from gentle worlds, where rain was considered harsh weather, suddenly understood what they were facing. They were not fighting a primitive species that had gotten lucky. They were fighting nightmares that had crawled out of a hell planet. On one of the smaller hegemony vessels, a young lieutenant named Dressa was trying to keep her crew calm. She was a bird-like creature with blue feathers and gentle eyes. Her homeworld had been peaceful for 10,000 years. Perhaps the reports are exaggerated, she told her frightened crew. Surely no species can be that dangerous. Then the communications officer intercepted a human entertainment broadcast. It was something called a sports channel. Dressa watched in horror as humans ran at each other at full speed, crashing together with enough force to break bones. Other humans cheered and celebrated when this happened. The injured players often got up and continued playing. They do this for fun? Dressa whispered. It appears so, Lieutenant, the communications officer said. They also have something called boxing, where they hit each other in the face repeatedly until one of them cannot stand up anymore. And there is another activity called mountain climbing, where they climb to places that will kill them if they fall, purely for the challenge. Dressa had to sit down. Her species had evolved on a moon with low gravity and no predators. The most dangerous thing on her world was a mild fungal infection. We threatened these people, she said quietly. We told them we would make them extinct. Yes, Lieutenant. What were we thinking? On the human side, Admiral Helena Vance was watching the hegemony fleet with something close to pity. Her tactical officer had just finished showing her the intelligence they had gathered on their enemies. Most of them come from very gentle environments, the officer reported. Low gravity, stable climates, no natural predators. They have never faced anything like us. I know, Helena said. That is why we need to end this quickly. I do not want to cause more deaths than necessary. Her first officer looked at her with surprise. Admiral, they threatened to exterminate our entire species. Yes, they did. But look at them. Helena gestured at the display showing the hegemony fleet. They are children playing with weapons they do not understand. They have never fought someone who could fight back. We need to teach them a lesson, not commit a massacre. She opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Vance. I want clean kills and minimal civilian casualties. If they surrender, we accept. We are not here to prove that we are monsters. We are here to prove that threatening humanity is a very bad idea. Back on the hegemony flagship, Velthrix was receiving reports from his intelligence officers. They had intercepted communications from the human fleet. "They are talking about minimizing our casualties," an officer reported, clearly confused. "They are discussing how to defeat us without killing too many of us." Velthrix did not understand. They should be trying to maximize damage. That is what any sensible species would do. Perhaps they are not sensible, High Arbiter. Or perhaps, Velthrix said slowly, they are so confident in their victory that they can afford to be merciful. The thought was more terrifying than any threat could have been. The humans were not desperately fighting for survival. They were managing a pest control problem and trying not to make too much of a mess. The human fleet was now visible on optical sensors. Velthrix could see the ships with his own eyes. They were ugly vessels, all angles and weapon ports. Nothing like the elegant curves of hegemony design, but they moved like living things. They dodged and weaved in patterns that his tactical computers could not predict. They communicated with each other in ways his officers could not intercept. "High Arbiter," his weapons officer said. "They will be in firing range in 3 minutes." Velthrix looked at his fleet. 200 ships filled with soldiers who had never known real war. Then he looked at the human fleet. 2,000 ships crewed by beings who had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day. "May the ancestors forgive me," he said quietly. "I have led my people to slaughter." He straightened in his command chair. He would not run. He would not beg. He would face the consequences of his arrogance, with whatever dignity he had left. "All ships," Velthrix commanded. "Prepare for combat." It was the last order many of his officers would ever hear. The first shot of the Battle of Sol was fired by the human destroyer, Relentless. A railgun round made of solid tungsten left the barrel at 3% of the speed of light. It crossed the distance between the two fleets in less than 2 seconds. The hegemony cruiser, Divine Purpose, never saw it coming. The round punched through their shields, through their armor, through their reactor core, and out the other side. The ship did not explode. It simply fell apart, cut in half by a projectile moving faster than anything the hegemony had ever designed. For a moment, both fleets were silent. Then the humans opened fire with everything they had. The hegemony fleet was arranged in a beautiful formation. It was a pattern they had used for 10,000 years, optimized for maximum sensor coverage and mutual shield support. It had worked against hundreds of species. It did not work against humans. Human ships did not fight in formation. They scattered like a swarm of angry insects, each vessel operating independently but somehow coordinating perfectly. They used their ship's artificial intelligence to make decisions faster than any living crew could match. They executed maneuvers that should have killed everyone aboard, pulling 15 times normal gravity as they twisted and turned through space. On the hegemony flagship, Velthrix watched his fleet die. "High Arbiter, the Eternal Grace is gone," an officer reported. "Direct hit to the bridge. The Morningstar has lost engines. They are drifting. The Righteous Vengeance is venting atmosphere on all decks." The reports came faster and faster. Velthrix had trained for war his entire life, but he had never experienced anything like this. Human weapons were not elegant energy beams designed for precision strikes. They were brutal things meant to destroy. Railguns fired solid metal at incredible speeds. Missiles with their own artificial intelligence chased hegemony ships and learned from each missed shot. Nuclear weapons pumped energy into laser beams powerful enough to cut through any armor. "Why are our shields not working?" Velthrix demanded. "Their weapons are kinetic, High Arbiter," his defensive officer explained frantically. "Our shields are designed to stop energy weapons. Solid projectiles pass right through. Then what good are they?" No one had an answer. On the human side, Admiral Vance watched the battle from the bridge of the Perseverance. Her expression was calm, almost sad. She did not enjoy what she was seeing, but she knew it was necessary. "Admiral, the hegemony flagship is still intact," her tactical officer reported. "Should we target it?" "No," Helena said. "I want their commander to see what happens. I want him to survive to tell others." "Understood, Admiral." The battle had been going on for only 20 minutes, but it was already clear how it would end. The hegemony had lost 60 ships. The humans had lost 3. Then things got worse for the hegemony. A human assault carrier named the Unconquered moved into position near a damaged hegemony cruiser. Instead of finishing it with weapons fire, the carrier launched boarding pods. 30 small craft shot across the gap between the ships. and attached themselves to the cruiser's hull. Inside those pods were human Marines. Lieutenant Dressa was still on her ship when she received the distress call from the cruiser. "We are being boarded," the captain of the cruiser screamed. "They are cutting through our hull. They are inside. They are—" The transmission cut off. Dressa switched to the cruiser's internal security cameras. What she saw would give her nightmares for the rest of her life. The humans moved through the ship like predators. They wore heavy armor that made them look even larger than they already were. They carried weapons that fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds, but the most terrifying thing was how they moved. Hegemony soldiers fired at them. Some shots hit. The humans did not stop. They did not even slow down. They just kept coming, stepping over fallen comrades, shooting with perfect accuracy, advancing room by room. One human took a direct hit to the arm. The arm was nearly severed, hanging by muscle and wire. The human looked at it, said something that Dressa's translator could not understand, and kept fighting with the other arm while a medic ran over and began reattaching the damaged limb. In the middle of a battle, "What are they?" Dressa whispered. The cruiser fell in 8 minutes. 200 hegemony soldiers against 30 humans. The humans lost 4. The hegemony lost everyone who did not surrender. But here was the strange part. The humans accepted surrenders. They took prisoners. They provided medical care to wounded enemies. They were brutal in combat but gentle in victory. Dressa did not understand. None of the hegemony officers understood. This was not how war was supposed to work. On the flagship, Velthrix received the reports with growing horror. His fleet had lost 120 ships. The humans had lost 7, and now they were boarding his remaining vessels and capturing them intact. "High Arbiter," his communications officer said. "We are receiving a message from the human admiral." Velthrix nodded. "Put it through." Admiral Vance appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. "High Arbiter Velthrix," she said. "You have lost this battle. You know it. I know it. Every being in both fleets knows it." Velthrix said nothing. "I am offering you the chance to surrender," Vance continued. "Order your remaining ships to stand down. We will take your people prisoner, but we will treat them well. They will receive medical care. They will not be tortured or executed. When this is over, we will return them to you." "Why?" Velthrix demanded. "Why show mercy? We threatened your species with extinction." Vance was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "Because we are not like you," she said. "We do not kill because we can. We kill because we must. And right now, we do not have to." She paused. "You have 60 seconds to decide." Velthrix looked around his bridge. His officers were wounded, frightened, exhausted. His fleet was broken. His soldiers were dying for a war that should never have happened. He thought about his pride. He thought about his career. He thought about the hegemony's 10,000 years of unbroken conquest. Then he thought about the young soldiers on his ships who were counting on him to keep them alive. "All ships," Velthrix said quietly. "Stand down. Power down weapons. Signal our surrender." The Battle of Sol was over. Of the 200 hegemony ships that had entered human space, 62 survived intact. Another 30 were too damaged to move but still had living crew. The rest were destroyed or captured. Human losses totaled 11 ships. As hegemony survivors were brought aboard human vessels, they expected cruelty. They expected revenge. Instead, they found medical teams waiting for them. They found warm blankets and clean water and food that their species could eat. A hegemony officer being treated for burns asked his human nurse why they were being so kind. She looked confused by the question. "Because you're hurt," she said. "What else would we do? But we came to destroy you." The nurse shrugged. "You didn't, though. You tried and failed. The fight's over now." She handed him a cup of warm liquid. "Here. It's called tea. It'll help you relax." The officer sipped the tea. It tasted strange but pleasant. "I do not understand your species," he admitted. The nurse smiled. "That's okay. Most species don't. But you'll have plenty of time to learn." On the Perseverance, Admiral Vance watched the recovery operations with satisfaction. The battle had been terrible. But it was over now. Humanity had proven its point without becoming the monsters the hegemony expected. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "High Arbiter Velthrix is requesting to speak with you personally." Helena nodded and took the call. Velthrix's image appeared on her screen. He looked broken, but there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. It might have been respect. "Admiral Vance," he said, "I must ask you something." "Go ahead." "When you received our ultimatum, you sighed. My officers recorded it. You sighed like we were an inconvenience, not a threat. Why?" Helena thought about the question for a long moment. "Because you were not the first," she finally said. "Earth has faced extinction threats before. Asteroids, ice ages, pandemics, our own nuclear weapons. We always survive because we prepare, and we never stop fighting." She looked at Velthrix with something almost like pity. "You thought you were bringing death to our doorstep, but we live with death every day. We were born on a world that tried to kill us. You were just one more thing trying to finish the job." Velthrix nodded slowly. "I believe I am beginning to understand." "Good," Helena said. "Then maybe this war does not have to continue. Maybe we can find another way." For the first time since the battle began, there was something like hope in Velthrix's eyes. "Perhaps," he said. "Perhaps we can." News of the Battle of Sol spread across the galaxy faster than light. The hegemony had controlled the stars for 10,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of species. They had never lost a fleet action. Until now. On the hegemony capital world of Celestine Prime, the High Council met in emergency session. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from 4,000 species, all of them trying to understand what had happened. 200 ships, destroyed by a species we had never heard of, said Councillor Thrand, a massive reptilian being who led the military faction. "This is unacceptable. We must respond with overwhelming force." "With what forces?" asked Councillor Mirrell, a delicate creature with crystalline skin who represented the diplomatic faction. "The humans destroyed our fleet with barely a scratch. Our intelligence reports say they have thousands more ships hidden across their territory. Then we send 50,000 ships," Thrand growled. "We burn their worlds. We make an example of them. And if they defeat that fleet as well?" Mirrell asked quietly. "What then? Do we keep sending fleets until we have none left?" The argument continued for hours. But outside the council chamber, something else was happening. The news of the battle had not just reached the hegemony leadership. It had reached the common people of hundreds of subject worlds. For thousands of years, these species had lived under hegemony rule. They paid taxes. They provided workers. They followed laws they had no voice in creating. They did this because they believed the hegemony was unbeatable. Now they knew it was not. On the mining world of Kreth 4, workers watched recordings of the battle on hidden screens. They saw human ships dancing through space like living things. They saw hegemony vessels exploding one after another. They saw something they had never seen before. They saw hope. "If the humans can fight them," one miner whispered to another, "maybe we can too." Similar conversations happened across dozens of worlds. The hegemony had ruled through fear for so long that they had forgotten what happened when fear disappeared. They were about to remember. But the biggest shock came from the humans themselves. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Vance did something no defeated enemy had ever done. She requested a diplomatic meeting with the High Council. Not to surrender, not to beg for mercy. She wanted to talk. The council agreed, mostly out of curiosity. They expected the humans to come with a fleet. Instead, Vance arrived with a single escort ship. She walked into the council chamber alone, wearing a simple uniform, carrying no weapons. 4,000 species watched as this small, soft creature stood before them without any sign of fear. "Thank you for meeting with me," Helena said. Her voice was calm and clear. "I know you are confused. You threatened to destroy us. We defeated your fleet. And now I am here to talk, instead of demanding your surrender. This is not how wars usually work." She paused to look around the chamber. "But we do not want a war. We never did. We were happy in our corner of the galaxy, building our colonies and living our lives. You came to us. You made the threats. We simply defended ourselves." Councillor Thrand slammed a massive fist on his desk. "You killed 40,000 of our soldiers. You sent them to die." Helena replied without raising her voice. "You could have left us alone. You chose not to. The responsibility for their deaths belongs to the people who gave the orders, not the people who defended their homes." The chamber was silent. "Here is what we want," Helena continued. "We want to be left alone. We want the hegemony to recognize our borders and our right to exist. We want a promise that you will never threaten our people again. And if we refuse, Muriel asked, then we will defend ourselves again, and again, and again, until you understand that we are not prey. Helena's eyes hardened. We did not use our full strength at Seoul. We held back because we did not want to cause unnecessary death. If you force us to fight again, we will not hold back. She let that sink in before continuing. But I do not think you will refuse. Because you have a bigger problem than us now. What problem? Thran demanded. Your subject species are watching, Helena said. They saw us beat you. They are asking themselves why they have been obeying you for so long. If you attack us again and lose again, they will stop asking questions and start taking action. The council members looked at each other uneasily. They knew she was right. Reports of unrest were already coming in from dozens of worlds. We are offering you a way out, Helena said. Make peace with us. Recognize our independence. We will not support rebellions against you. We will trade with you. We will even help you if you face external threats. But we will never submit to you. And we will never stop fighting for our freedom. The debate that followed lasted 3 days. In the end, the council had no real choice. They agreed to a treaty recognizing human sovereignty and establishing trade relations. But the treaty had a secret clause that the hegemony demanded be kept quiet. Humanity would not actively support rebellions against the hegemony. The humans agreed to that condition. Then they added their own. We will not support rebellions, Helena said. But we will offer asylum to any being who reaches human space. No exceptions, no matter who they are or where they come from. If they can get to us, we will protect them. The hegemony negotiators were horrified. That will encourage every dissident and rebel in the galaxy to try to reach you. Helena smiled. Yes, it will. The first refugee ships arrived at human colonies within months. They came in broken-down vessels held together with hope and desperation. They carried beings who had never known freedom, who had been slaves or servants or workers their entire lives. Human volunteers met them at the docks. They brought food and blankets and medicine. They helped families find places to live. They taught children who had never been to school. They treated every refugee as a person worthy of respect. Word spread. More ships came, then more. On a small human colony called New Hope, a refugee camp grew into a small city. It was filled with beings from dozens of species, all of them learning to live together, all of them free for the first time in their lives. An elderly female named Sora had been a slave for 60 years. She had never made a choice for herself, never owned anything, never been allowed to speak unless spoken to. Now she sat in a small apartment that was hers alone, drinking tea and watching the sunset through her window. A human social worker named Maria came to check on her. How are you settling in, Sora? Sora struggled to find words. I do not understand why you do this, she finally said. We have nothing to offer you. We are broken people from broken worlds. Why do you help us? Maria sat down across from her. Because everyone deserves a chance, she said. Because freedom is not something you earn. It is something you have by right. Because we were alone in the universe once, and we know how that feels. But you owe us nothing. We do not help people because we owe them something, Maria said. We help people because it is the right thing to do. That is who we are. Sora was quiet for a long moment. Then tears began to fall from her eyes. They were the first tears she had cried since she was a child. I never knew such people existed, she whispered. Maria reached out and took her hand. Now you do. Back on Celestine Prime, the High Council watched the growing stream of refugees with frustration and fear. Every being who escaped to human space was a reminder that the hegemony could be defied. Every successful refugee was proof that freedom was possible. We should have destroyed them when we had the chance. Thrand growled. We never had the chance, Muriel replied. That is the point. We have ruled through fear for 10,000 years, and now we face a species that does not fear us. Everything is going to change. She looked out the window at the city below, where hegemony citizens went about their lives unaware of how much their world was about to shift. The humans have done something far more dangerous than defeating our fleet, Muriel said. They have given the galaxy hope, and hope is something we cannot bomb into submission. Thrand had no answer for that. On the Perseverance, now stationed near New Hope, Admiral Vance watched the refugee city grow. Her aide handed her a report showing the number of beings who had reached human space in the past month. It was growing exponentially. Admiral, her aide said. Some in the government are concerned. We cannot save everyone in the galaxy. Helena nodded. No, we cannot. But we can save the ones who reach us. And we can show the others that it is worth trying. She turned to look at her aide. Not by conquering it, by inspiring it. She looked back at the city of refugees, where beings who had been slaves were learning what it meant to be free. We did not ask for this responsibility, she said, but we have it now, and we will not turn away from it. That is not who we are. The aide smiled. Yes, Admiral. I believe that is the point. 20 years had passed since the Battle of Sol. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Terran Cooperative, as humanity's government was now called, had grown from 17 star systems to 80, but humans had not conquered any of them. Every new system had come to them willingly. Species who had lived under hegemony rule for thousands of years had asked for human protection. They had seen what humanity offered, and they wanted it for themselves. Human worlds were strange places now. Dozens of species lived side by side in cities that sprawled across planets and moons. There were problems, of course. Different species had different needs, different cultures, different ways of seeing the world. Arguments happened. Misunderstandings happened. Sometimes there was even violence, but there was also something the hegemony had never offered. There was freedom. There was choice. There was the chance to build your own life, without someone telling you what you were worth. On Earth, the original human homeworld, a memorial stood in the city of Geneva. It honored the 11 human ships that had been lost at the Battle of Sol, along with the names of everyone who had died defending their species. But next to it was another memorial, added 10 years later. This one honored the 40,000 hegemony soldiers who had died in the same battle. The inscription read, "They were soldiers following orders. They deserved better leaders." The memorial had been controversial when it was first proposed. Some humans had argued that the hegemony did not deserve remembrance. But Admiral Vance, retired and living quietly on Mars, had spoken in favor of it. "We do not honor them because they were right," she had said. "We honor them because they were people, and people deserve to be remembered. If we forget their humanity, we lose our own." The memorial stayed. Vance was 87 now. She lived on a small farm with her wife Elena, growing vegetables and keeping alien plants alive despite the harsh Martian conditions. She had become famous across the galaxy, but she did not care about fame. She cared about her garden and her family and the letters she received from refugees who wanted to thank her for their freedom. One afternoon, a young journalist came to interview her. He was from a hegemony news service, researching a documentary about the changes in the galaxy since first contact with humans. "Admiral Vance," he asked, "what do you consider your greatest achievement?" Helena thought about it while watering her plants. "Not destroying your people," she finally said. The journalist was surprised. "What do you mean?" "After the battle, we could have kept going. We could have burned our way across the galaxy. We could have taken revenge for the threats your leaders made. A lot of humans wanted that." She looked at him with her cybernetic eyes. "We chose not to. We chose to build something instead of breaking something. That is the achievement I am most proud of. Do you regret any of it?" "I regret the deaths," Helena said. "All of them. Ours and yours. War is waste. But I do not regret defending my people, and I do not regret the world we have built since." Back on the hegemony capital world, things had changed as well. The old empire had not collapsed, but it had contracted. Dozens of species had broken away over the past 2 decades. Some had joined the Terran Cooperative. Others had formed their own independent nations. The hegemony still controlled thousands of worlds, but its grip was weaker than it had been in centuries. A new generation had grown up watching human entertainment, eating human food, and wondering why their government was so different from what they saw on their screens. Human stories were everywhere. They told tales of underdogs who won against impossible odds, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, of the belief that every being had value, regardless of where they came from. These stories were changing minds. Counselor Miral, now the leader of the reformist faction on the High Council, had pushed through changes that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. Subject species had more rights now. The harshest labor laws had been softened. There was even talk of allowing non-hegemony species to serve on the council itself. "We cannot go back to what we were," Miral had told her fellow counselors. "The humans showed us another way. We can either learn from them or watch our empire crumble." The choice is ours. Not everyone agreed. Counselor Thrand and his military faction still dreamed of revenge, but they were growing weaker each year. The galaxy was changing, and they could not stop it. On a space station at the border between Hegemony Space and the Terran Cooperative, a young Hegemony female named Dressa ran a small cafe. She was the same Dressa who had watched the Battle of Sol from her ship's bridge, the one who had seen humans boarding Hegemony vessels, and wondered what kind of creatures they were. She had spent the past 20 years finding out. After the war, she had resigned from the Hegemony military. She could not serve an empire that had sent her to die so carelessly. She had wandered for years before finding this station, where humans and Hegemony citizens and dozens of other species met and traded and argued and sometimes even became friends. She served something called coffee now. It was a human drink that had become popular across the galaxy. The caffeine it contained was mildly addictive to most species, and humans found this hilarious. A young Hegemony student came into the cafe with her human friend. They were classmates at the station's university, the first integrated school in the galaxy. The student's name was Kella, and she had grown up hearing stories about the terrible humans who had humiliated her people. Meeting actual humans had confused her. They were not monsters. They were just people. Strange people who ate bizarre foods and told odd jokes and got attached to random objects, but people nonetheless. Dressa, Kella asked while sipping her coffee. What were humans like when you first met them? During the battle, Dressa thought about the question. She remembered the terror she had felt watching humans board Hegemony ships. She remembered expecting to die. I thought they would kill us all, she admitted. I thought they would torture us and execute us and make examples of us. That is what the Hegemony would have done. But they didn't, Kella said. No. They gave us medical care. They gave us food. They treated us like people. Dressa smiled at the memory. A human nurse gave me tea when I was wounded. I did not understand why. I asked her why she was being kind to someone who had tried to kill her people. What did she say? She said the fight was over, so there was no reason to keep being enemies. Dressa shook her head. It took me years to understand what she meant. The Hegemony taught us that enemies are enemies forever. Humans do not think that way. They fight when they have to. Then they stop and try to make friends. That seems inefficient, Kella said. It is, Dressa agreed. But it is also how they built the cooperative. They made friends out of enemies. They welcomed refugees who had nothing to offer. They treated every being as if they had value. She paused. That is why they are changing the galaxy. Not because they are strong, because they are kind. Kella thought about this. Her human friend, a boy named James, was listening with an embarrassed expression. We are not that special, James said. We just try to do the right thing. Dressa laughed. That is what makes you special. You believe there is a right thing, and you try to do it. Most species gave up on that idea a long time ago. Later that evening, Kella walked through the station with James. They passed beings from a dozen different species, all of them living together in something that was not quite harmony but was closer to it than the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. James, Kella asked, what did your people feel when the Hegemony threatened them? My grandmother asked Admiral Vance that question once. She said humans were just annoyed. James laughed. That sounds right. My great-grandmother was on one of the ships at Sol. She told me that when they got the ultimatum, most people were just like, really? We have to deal with this now? You were not afraid? We are always afraid, James said. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every day. We are afraid of earthquakes and diseases and asteroids and each other. But we do not let fear stop us. We just prepare and then do what needs to be done. Kella considered this. Is that why you are so strange? James grinned. Probably. But strange is not bad. Strange just means there is more to learn about each other. He offered her a piece of something he called chocolate. It was sweet and rich and unlike anything her species had evolved to eat. She decided she liked strange. 100 years after first contact, a Hegemony historian named Senna published the definitive account of humanity's entry onto the galactic stage. She called it the sigh heard across the stars, a reference to Admiral Vance's first response to the Hegemony's threats. In her conclusion, she wrote, we expected conquest or submission. We received neither. The humans simply sighed. The sound of a patient species facing yet another challenge in a universe full of them. And then they changed everything. They did not conquer us. They did something far more unsettling. They made us question whether we wanted to be the kind of civilization that needed conquering. The hegemony ruled through fear for 10,000 years. The humans have influenced the galaxy for a single century, and they have done it through something we still struggle to understand. They genuinely believe that every thinking being deserves freedom, dignity, and a chance to find their own path. It is a terrifying philosophy. It suggests that our entire history of empire was unnecessary. It suggests that we could have been something better all along. Perhaps that is the real reason we feared them. Not because they could destroy us, but because they made us see ourselves clearly for the first time. The humans sighed at our threats, and then they showed us another way to exist. The galaxy will never be the same. She closed her book and looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were building, and teaching, and welcoming strangers, and stubbornly believing that the universe could be better than it was. She hoped they were right. She was beginning to think they might be.